Imagine driving home at midnight. The road is empty, the air is still, and your only company is the sound of your own tires rolling across the asphalt. In your rearview mirror, a pair of headlights appear. They're distant at first, but no matter how many turns you make, no matter how fast or slow you drive, they never go away. What if you realized the driver wasn't human? Picture the cold flicker of static on the radio, the faint whisper of something you can't quite make out, and the sharp, shallow sound of breathing that doesn't belong to you. Out there, in the dark, between silence and shadows, countless people have faced nights that changed them forever. Tonight, you'll hear 3 true, terrifying encounters from people who should have made it home safe, but didn't. The first is a story of a college student who thought the only thing behind him was another late-night driver until he looked closer into his rearview mirror. The second follows a trucker who learned the hard way that sometimes the things you pass on the road refuse to be left behind. And the third is about a young woman whose GPS led her down a road that never should have existed. 3 roads, 3 nights, 3 stories that remind us that the most dangerous part of driving alone in the dark may not be the road itself, but what waits along it. So ask yourself, if you were the one behind the wheel and something was following you, would you make it home alive? Story 1. The Shadow in the Rearview. On a quiet campus town in the Midwest, a college student named Daniel left his part-time job just after midnight. The streets were deserted, lit only by scattered lamps flickering in the cold autumn wind. His car sat alone in the parking lot, surrounded by silence. He wasn't afraid of late-night drives. He had done them dozens of times before. The road home was long, but familiar. Tonight, though, something about it felt different. The air seemed heavier. The silence deeper. The moment he turned the key in the ignition, a faint crackle of static hissed through the car's speakers, despite the radio being off. Daniel brushed it off, pulling out of the lot. His headlights stretched forward into the empty road, swallowing patches of darkness, one by one. 10 minutes into the drive, Daniel noticed a pair of headlights appear in his rearview mirror. Far away at first, just a small glow in the darkness. He didn't think much of it. After all, he wasn't the only one out this late. But as he took the next left turn, the headlights followed. When he slowed down, they slowed down. When he sped up, so did they, always at the same distance. The steady glow of those lights in the mirror began to gnaw at him. He told himself it was nothing, just another driver heading the same way. Still, he couldn't ignore the feeling that the car behind him wasn't trying to pass. It wasn't trying to get closer. It was just watching. The road stretched on, lined with empty fields on both sides. Not a house, not a store, not even a gas station in sight. Just Daniel and those lights. The minutes dragged. Daniel tried to focus on the road, but his eyes kept flicking back to the mirror. At one point, he thought he saw movement in the glow. Not just the shape of the car, but something inside it. A figure sitting too still in the driver's seat. He shook his head, told himself he was imagining it. Yet the longer he stared, the more certain he became. The driver wasn't moving at all. No shifting of hands on the wheel, no tilt of the head. Just a shadow locked in place, illuminated only by the glow of its own headlights. Daniel's chest tightened. His grip on the steering wheel grew stiff. He thought about pulling over at the next stop, letting the car pass. But when he glanced at the gas gauge, a cold wave washed over him. He was running low. The closest station was still miles away. Finally, Daniel made a sharp right turn onto a smaller back road, hoping to lose the driver. Gravel crunched under his tires as he sped through the narrow lane. For a moment, the rearview mirror was empty. Relief washed over him. Until the headlights reappeared. Closer this time. And Daniel realized something horrifying. The lights weren't shifting with the road's curves. They weren't bouncing with the gravel. They glided, perfectly steady, as if floating in the air. Heart pounding, Daniel pressed the gas pedal harder. His car roared down the road, the engine trembling, gravel spitting under the wheels. But no matter how fast he went, the lights stayed locked at the same distance. Silent, smooth, unnatural. Daniel's thoughts raced. Who was this? What did they want? The static returned, louder this time, hissing through the speakers, though the radio remained off. Underneath it, he swore he heard whispers, words he couldn't understand, spoken in a voice that didn't belong inside his car. Then, something shifted. He looked in the rearview mirror and his blood froze. The lights were gone, but the shadow was still there. Not in the car behind him. No. This time, it was sitting in his own back seat. Perfectly still. Its outline faint but unmistakable. A figure, sitting just a few feet behind him, head tilted unnaturally toward the ceiling. He couldn't breathe. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as his eyes darted between the mirror and the road. He told himself not to look again, not to confirm what he thought he saw. But he did. And in that instant, the figure leaned forward. The whispering grew louder, filling the car with a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The static roared, the engine sputtered, and Daniel swerved, barely keeping control of the wheel. Then, silence. When he slammed the brakes and looked again, the back seat was empty. The headlights were gone. And the road behind him was nothing but darkness. He made it home that night, but Daniel never drove that stretch of road again. And to this day, he swears that when he's alone in his car at night, he can still feel the weight of unseen eyes in the mirror, watching from the back seat. Story 2. The Hitchhiker That Followed. Highways at night can be the loneliest places on Earth. Endless stretches of concrete, the white lines flashing by in silence, and the sense that the rest of the world is asleep while you keep moving forward. For Mark, a long-haul truck driver, late-night drives were nothing new. He'd crossed the country dozens of times, carrying cargo through desolate highways and forgotten backroads. He thought he had seen it all. But one night, traveling across an empty stretch of highway in New Mexico, Mark encountered something that would stay with him forever. It began when he spotted a figure on the side of the road, a lone hitchhiker, dressed in white, standing perfectly still, one arm extended with a thumb pointing upward. At first, Mark thought nothing of it. Hitchhikers weren't uncommon on these routes. But there was something strange about this one. The figure wasn't shifting its weight, wasn't moving at all, just waiting. Mark kept driving. He had a rule: never pick up strangers. Too many stories, too many dangers. Yet, as his truck roared past, his eyes flicked to the side mirror, and what he saw sent a shiver down his spine. The hitchhiker was still there, not behind him, not fading away in the distance, still there, standing by the side of the road, lit faintly by the truck's rear lights. He blinked, shook his head, told himself he was tired, but a few minutes later he glanced again, and the hitchhiker was closer. Now standing by the next mile marker, perfectly still, thumb raised once more. Mark's stomach tightened. The figure hadn't been walking, hadn't moved naturally down the road. It was just there. Mile after mile, the pattern repeated. The figure appeared again and again, sometimes on the left, sometimes on the right, always standing, always waiting. The night grew colder, the road darker. Mark rolled down his window slightly, hoping the crisp desert air would wake him. But instead, he heard something that froze his blood. A faint knock, coming from the side of the truck. Impossible, he thought. He was moving at 60 miles per hour. Yet the sound came again, slow, deliberate, as if someone was tapping along the door. He slammed the window shut, his heart racing. The radio burst with sudden static, filling the cab with a sharp hiss. And through it, just beneath the noise, Mark swore he heard a voice whisper, "Stop the truck." Mark pressed harder on the accelerator. His eyes darted to the mirrors, searching for headlights, for signs of another car, but the highway was empty. Then, just ahead in his high beams, he saw it. The hitchhiker, standing in the middle of the road. He swerved, tires screeching, the massive truck lurching to the side. The trailer rattled violently, nearly toppling as he struggled to regain control. When the vehicle finally slowed to a trembling halt, Mark's hands shook on the wheel. The road ahead was empty. The figure was gone. But then came the sound. A knock. This time not on the side of the truck, on the passenger side window. Slow, measured, as though whoever it was wanted him to know they were right there. Mark forced himself to look. In the glass, there was no face looking back. No man, no woman. Just a reflection of something pale. Something stretched too thin, with hollow eyes that glowed faintly under the highway lights. The figure leaned closer, and though the cab was sealed, though the glass separated them, he heard the words clear as day. "Thanks for the ride." Then nothing. When he blinked, the reflection was gone, the highway was silent, the night returned to normal, as though nothing had happened at all. Mark made it to the next truck stop hours later, exhausted, pale, and shaken. He told no one what he saw until years later. He never took that stretch of highway again. Highway Patrol, however, reported something strange the following morning. Faint footprints in the dust along the roadside, too many to count, circling the asphalt, ending abruptly in the middle of the highway, as though whoever left them had simply vanished. To this day, Mark says that sometimes, when he's driving long stretches of road at night, he hears faint knocking against the side of his cab. What would you have done? Would you have stopped or kept driving, knowing something was waiting just ahead? Story 3: The Unfinished Road. Not all roads are meant to be traveled. Some are unfinished, forgotten. And sometimes, when you trusted GPS too much, it leads you into places you were never meant to go. It was after 1 a.m. when a young woman named Sarah left her workplace and began the long drive home. The highway was closed for maintenance, so she followed her GPS, which rerouted her through a series of unfamiliar back roads. At first, it seemed simple enough. Empty country lanes, trees bending over the asphalt, the sound of gravel crunching beneath her tires. But the further she drove, the less familiar everything became. No streetlights, no houses, just a single winding road that seemed to stretch endlessly into the dark. Her phone signal vanished, and with it, the possibility of calling anyone for help. Sarah noticed the road changing beneath her. Fresh asphalt gave way to patches of dirt. Traffic signs disappeared. Even the painted lines on the road faded away. Her headlights cut through the dark, but every turn seemed to lead to more emptiness. Her GPS voice calmly repeated, "Continue straight for 3 miles." But then her stomach turned. The same tree she had passed minutes earlier appeared again. A large oak, broken branches stretching over the road. She slowed, staring, realizing she was caught in a loop. And then she noticed something else. In her rearview mirror, headlights. They weren't there before. And worse, they had no source, no vehicle outline, no sound of an engine, just 2 glowing orbs hovering in the distance, closing in with every passing second. She pressed the gas, speeding down the winding road. Her car jolted and rattled over loose dirt, the headlights still steady behind her. Her GPS crackled with static before cutting out entirely. For a moment, the screen flickered black. Then, in distorted digital text, it displayed, "You have arrived at your final destination." The voice that followed was no longer the calm robotic tone. It was something deeper, rasping, broken, as if multiple voices were speaking at once. Sarah slammed her phone shut, but the sound didn't stop. It filled her car, vibrating through the speakers even though the device was turned off. Then came the smell, the acrid stench of smoke, burning rubber. She looked ahead, and her heart nearly stopped. The road ended abruptly at an unfinished bridge, its skeletal frame hanging over a black canyon. No signs, no barriers, just a sudden drop into nothing. Sarah hit the brakes, tires screeching as the car skidded dangerously close to the edge. Gravel spat out into the void, vanishing without sound. Her chest heaved as she tried to steady herself, and then she saw it. A figure, standing in the unfinished road ahead. At first, it was just a silhouette, but as her headlights fell over it, she saw its face. Blank, featureless, skin stretched smooth as porcelain. It didn't move, it didn't blink, and then, in a single instant, it was gone. Her hands trembled as she scanned the road. That was when the knocking came. From the passenger side window. Her head whipped to the side, and her breath caught in her throat. The figure was there, face pressed against the glass, featureless skin inches away from hers. The glass rattled as though it was about to shatter. She screamed, flooring the accelerator, swerving violently back down the road she came from. The figure was gone, but the sound of knocking followed her, on the roof, on the doors, all around her car. When she finally burst out onto a main road an hour later, she collapsed in relief. But the next morning, her car was found abandoned near the construction site. Driver's side door wide open, engine still running, no trace of Sarah. Police reports state that such a road does not exist in the area her GPS directed her to. No bridge, no construction site. Nothing. And yet, her car was there. To this day, no one knows where Sarah went. Some believe she drove off into the canyon, lost forever in the darkness. Others say she was taken by whatever waited for her on that unfinished road. But one thing is certain. Late at night, in that part of the county, some drivers still report seeing headlights appear behind them, floating silently, always following until they disappear. 3 roads, 3 nights, 3 lives changed forever. What began as ordinary drives home became journeys into the unknown. A shadow in the back seat, a hitchhiker who refused to be left behind, a road that should never have existed. These stories remind us of something most drivers never want to admit. Sometimes, the real danger isn't the road itself. It's what waits in the darkness, watching, following, and waiting for the moment you're most alone. And if you've ever felt it, the headlights that stay too long in your mirror, the figure standing by the roadside, the voice you hear when no one is there, you know the fear doesn't end when the car stops. It lingers. It stays with you, long after the drive is over. So now, I'll leave you with a question. What do you think happened to Daniel, to Mark, and to Sarah? Were they unlucky victims of chance? Or did something else take them? Something that still waits for the next driver who doesn't see the warning signs. Share your own terrifying experiences in the comments below, because sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones you hear, they're the ones you've lived. And if tonight's stories kept you looking over your shoulder, then you won't want to miss what comes next. In our next episode, we'll take you inside the walls of one of the most haunted asylums in America, a place where the screams of the past have never gone silent. Until then, drive safe. And if you find yourself alone on a dark road tonight, remember, some headlights are never meant to be followed.